A daring decision left Sarah Mitchell with nothing. Or was it just the beginning? At the heart of Brewhaven Café in Hanover, Virginia, she faced a brutal choice: to expel a veteran and his service dog, or to abandon the job she loved. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, fear mingling with pride. She chose to uphold her integrity and stepped out of the cafe with trembling hands, unaware that a single phone camera had captured every moment. Minutes later, the ground trembled. 4 Humvees roared onto the scene, and a Marine Corps colonel strode in, revealing a secret that stunned the entire town. All right, my dear viewers, get ready for a story that will leave you awestruck. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, only if you truly resonate with what you're about to see. And drop a comment below to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always exciting to see friends joining us from all around the world. Hanover, Virginia, is a small town nestled in the heart of America's East, just a 20-minute drive from Richmond. Cobblestone streets shaded by ancient oaks, porches fluttering with stars and stripes flags, and an old-fashioned general store with a faded Nixon-era sign paint a quaint tableau, as if time itself has slowed to make room for memories. At the town's center, amid the chirping of birds and the scent of freshly baked bread, Brewhaven Café stands like a warm beacon, not merely for its rich aroma of freshly roasted coffee, but for its soul. Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old woman whose gentle smile makes every stranger feel as though they've come home. Sarah is more than Brewhaven's manager. She cultivates precious moments where weary souls find connection. With her hair tied high, eyes bright as morning sun, and a soft yet resolute voice, she has transformed the cafe into a sanctuary. Soldiers from nearby Fort Lee, only 15 miles away, often seek her out. They enter burdened by battlefield memories, but leave lighter, comforted by a hot cup of coffee and Sarah's non-judgmental listening. Brewhaven offers no fancy latte art or elaborate menu. Instead, it serves coffee in handcrafted ceramic mugs, displays handwritten message boards filled with patrons' notes, and provides a space where everyone is free to simply be themselves, if only for a few hours. Sarah is the widow of First Lieutenant Daniel Mitchell, a Marine who fell in Syria 7 years ago. Daniel's photograph hangs behind the register, not in gleaming uniform with medals, but in a simple blue sweater, holding a coffee cup, beaming outside Brewhaven. That photo was taken 2 weeks before his final deployment, an image Sarah holds close to her heart as she holds coffee beans before brewing. It is no token of war, but a reminder of love and the peaceful future they once dreamed of together. When Daniel did not return, Sarah refused to let grief consume her. She channeled her passion into Brewhaven, making the cafe not only a place for drinks, but a place of healing for invisible wounds. Every Wednesday at 9 a.m., Sarah hosts Freedom Hour, a quiet yet meaningful town tradition. It began shortly after she took over the cafe, when Mr. Henry, an elderly Vietnam veteran, walked in with eyes weighed down by jungle memories. Sarah asked nothing, simply served him black coffee, and sat down to hear him speak of monsoon rains and comrades who never came home. From that moment, Freedom Hour was born, a pressure-free space where veterans from World War II to Afghanistan gather. They share stories, laughter over training days, and solemn silences when they remember fallen friends. Sarah always opens each session with a simple line: "This is a place to be seen, not fixed." And the veterans nod, sip their coffee, and let their stories flow like a river, finding its outlet. For Sarah, Brewhaven is more than a job. It is her mission. She remembers every name, knows who takes sugarless coffee, and who needs a quiet corner after a nightmare. She notices small details, like how one veteran grips his cup when recalling the day he lost a comrade, or how another always chooses the seat by the window so sunlight can soothe his spirit. Sarah rarely speaks of herself, but the whole town knows her story. They call her the quiet flame, the one who keeps Hanover united, not with speeches, but with small, meaningful acts. Soldiers address her as ma'am, with genuine respect. Children hold the door for her without being asked. Even the mayor stops by monthly, not for coffee, but to thank her for doing what no policy ever could, bringing people together. Sarah seeks no glory. For her, each cup she pours is a promise that no matter how chaotic the world may be, there will always be somewhere to return to. But she never expected that on one fateful Wednesday morning, that very mission would thrust her into the eye of a storm, where her kindness would be tested, and her story would echo far beyond Hanover's oak-lined streets. Wednesday morning at Brewhaven, Hanover, Virginia, began like any other, filled with warm tranquility. The door chime tinkled softly. The aroma of freshly roasted coffee wafted through the air, mingling with the murmurs of regulars and the gentle clink of ceramic mugs on the counter. Dawn light streamed through the windows, casting streaks of brightness across the wooden floor, creating a space that felt like a second home. The cafe's familiar faces, veterans carrying silent stories, filtered in. Among them was 50-year-old James Carter, a former Marine with a weathered frame but eyes still resolute. At his side lay Rusty, his golden retriever mix service dog, wearing a red vest labeled "Service Dog, Do Not Pet." Sarah Mitchell, the heart and soul of Brewhaven, greeted James with a gentle smile, handed him a cup of black coffee, and pointed to the table by the window where Rusty curled up underneath, those loyal brown eyes fixed on his owner. Sarah moved deftly behind the counter, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of kindness. She poured coffee, chatted softly, and noted every detail, a veteran gripping his cup tighter, another staring pensively out the window. To her, Brewhaven was a refuge, where soldiers who had faced the fires of war found comfort in respectful silence. But that peace did not last. The cafe door swung open with a sharp screech, shattering the morning's rhythm. Victor Hammond, the state health inspector, strode in, folder in hand like a weapon, his cold gaze cutting through the warm atmosphere. Without greeting, he inspected the counter, opened the refrigerator, tapped utensils, and scrawled notes with a scowl, as though the cafe were a hazard to be eradicated. Then Hammond spotted Rusty. He stiffened, pointed at the dog, and barked, "That dog is a health code violation. No animals are allowed in food service areas." The entire cafe fell silent. Coffee cups froze midair, conversations halted, and every eye turned to James, his knuckles white as he tightened his grip on the mug, and to Sarah, who stepped out from behind the counter, her eyes bright but unwavering. Rusty stayed still, ears flicking, looking to James for direction. Sarah drew a steady breath, her voice calm yet imbued with unbreakable resolve. "Rusty is a registered service dog. The law permits him to be here." Hammond sneered, glancing at her as if she were inconsequential. "I don't care," he snapped. "Dander, hair, saliva, that's a health risk. Get it out of here, or I'll shut this place down." James froze, his body stiff as stone, but Rusty did not budge. He simply stared at his owner. The cafe felt suffocating with tension, like a string pulled to its breaking point. Sarah stood tall, her gaze fixed on Hammond. She knew her next words would change everything, Yet her heart, hardened by loss but taught to love, would not allow her to back down. "I will not ask a veteran to leave," she declared, each word carving the air. "And I will not ask his dog to leave. If you wish to file a report, go ahead. But know that you are insulting someone who has sacrificed for this country." Her words were a small flame kindling the silence. A few customers nodded, one murmuring, "Amen to that." But the moment was cut short. From the corner stepped Margaret Klein, regional director of Brewhaven's parent company, there for a routine inspection, yet witness to it all. Her eyes were ice, her voice a blade. "Sarah Mitchell," she said, each syllable a slash, "you have just violated corporate policy in front of a state inspector. Pack your things. You're fired." A hush spread through the cafe. A spoon clattered onto the floor like a bell tolling in stillness. James looked at Sarah, his eyes heavy with helpless sorrow. Sarah did not cry or tremble. She removed her apron, folded it neatly as one would a flag, and placed it on the counter. Turning to Mia, the young barista frozen by the espresso machine, she whispered, "Make sure James gets a refill." Then she walked out, the morning sun illuminating her hair like a quiet halo. The cafe fell into silence, but in the corner, one customer pressed record on their phone. Sarah's act of defiance had been captured, and that spark was about to ignite far beyond what she could imagine. 30 minutes after Sarah Mitchell left Brewhaven, the atmosphere inside the Hanover, Virginia Café remained heavy, as if the injustice that had occurred had sucked all the oxygen from the room. Patrons whispered quietly, cups of coffee cooled untouched, and eyes averted each other. Suddenly, a distant rumble rolled in, like thunder echoing across the Virginia fields, making the wooden floorboards tremble and the coffee in cups gently ripple. Everyone rose and crowded the window. Through the morning mist, 4 military Humvees appeared on Main Street, their tires roaring, headlights slicing the fog like blades of light. They rolled slowly to a halt in front of Brewhaven, blocking the parking lot in a silent declaration. The doors opened in unison, and Colonel William Harper stepped out. A seasoned Marine in his dress blues, medals gleaming with stories of sacrifice. His polished boots met the ground, and his gaze swept through every soul in the cafe. Behind him stood 20 Marines in crisp uniforms, at attention on the sidewalk, forming an impenetrable wall of steel. They were more than soldiers. They embodied honor, here for Sarah. Inside, no one dared to breathe. Inspector Victor Hammond stood frozen near the pastry counter, the folder slipping from his hand and clattering weakly to the floor. Margaret Klein, the regional director, backed away, her face ashen, clutching her notebook like a shield. The door chime sounded sharply through the silence as Harper entered. His boots tapped a steady march on the wooden floor, each step a drumbeat of fate. He paused mid-room, his gaze flicking to Mia, the young barista trembling behind the counter, then resting on James Carter as he slowly rose. James, bearing the resolute bearing of a former Marine, offered a silent nod, a salute among brothers in arms. Harper returned the gesture with a precise, respectful hand salute that sent a shiver through several onlookers. Hammond stammered, I don't know who he—" Harper cut him off, his tone low but sharp, each word driving like a nail into the air. "You don't need to know who they are to treat them with dignity. Sarah Mitchell upheld this country's promise to soldiers like James Carter. You did not." His voice was quiet, but its weight forced Hammond's head down and his shoulders to hunch. Harper then turned to Mia, his expression softening yet still firm. "Where is Sarah?" Mia swallowed hard, her voice choking out. "She was fired for defending James and Rusty." Harper clenched his jaw, anger simmering in his eyes. "That woman gave my Marines a place to breathe, to feel human. She deserves our honor, not to be cast aside." Without waiting for a reaction, Harper stepped back and signaled to his Marines with a crisp wave. 2 Marines entered and removed the Brew Haven logo from the wall, careful as if lowering a battle flag, folding it respectfully. Another Marine hung a new sign, freshly painted white with bold letters reading, "Sarah's House, where honor is celebrated." Light from the window illuminated the sign, making it glow like a solemn vow. Patrons erupted into applause, some wiping away tears, and an elderly man near the counter whispered, "This is justice." Margaret Klein tried to speak. "Sir, But Harper merely fixed her with a piercing gaze. "You made your choice," he said coldly. "Now we make ours." In that moment, Sarah's story transcended the walls of Brew Haven. It became a movement, a flame kindled by kindness and unwavering resolve, ready to spread far beyond Hanover's streets. The applause continued as Harper looked to James, with Rusty lying calmly at his feet, as if both knew that today honor had prevailed. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or grab a glass of water, then stay tuned for the rest of this unexpected story. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's always exciting to see friends joining us from around the world. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this tale, so we can continue bringing you more great stories. Sarah Mitchell sat quietly in her old pickup truck, the key clutched tight in her hand, though the engine remained silent. The road home to Hanover, Virginia stretched out before her, hazy in the morning light, as if inviting her back to the familiar. But her mind was stuck, replaying over and over the moment she was fired at Brew Haven, the cold stare of Margaret Klein, James Carter's painful silence, and the way she folded her apron as though folding away a part of herself. She inhaled deeply, trying to dispel the heaviness, when her phone buzzed. A message from Fort Lee appeared on the screen. "Colonel Harper requests you report to headquarters today." Sarah frowned, her heart pounding. She did not know what it meant, but a deep intuition, like a soft breeze through Virginia's fields, whispered that something significant awaited. She drove beneath oak-shaded roads to the gates of Fort Lee, where American flags fluttered proudly and the cadenced shouts of recruits echoed like the base's heartbeat. The last time Sarah had been here, she was Lieutenant Daniel Mitchell's wife. Today she entered as an outsider, her shoes dusted with coffee grounds, and her heart filled with both hope and unease. Colonel William Harper met her at the administrative building, no longer in his resplendent dress blues but in simple khakis, yet his presence remained commanding, like a silent mountain. "Sarah," he said, shaking her hand firmly, a grip as solid as his commitment. "Thank you for coming." His voice was warm, but his eyes revealed determination, as though he saw a future she had yet to imagine. Harper led Sarah down a long corridor lined with portraits of past commanders and gleaming medals, each telling a story of courage and sacrifice. They stopped before a modest sign, Veterans Support Center. Inside, the space lay unfinished, folding chairs piled haphazardly, a blank whiteboard, and unopened boxes of supplies scattered about. Light from the window illuminated floating dust motes in the air, as if the room were awaiting a fresh draft. Standing in the center, Harper turned to Sarah, his tone earnest. This is a project we've tried to launch for 2 years, a place for veterans to heal, not only through therapy, but through community and understanding. But we lack someone who truly knows them, not from books, but from the heart. Sarah folded her arms, her gaze sweeping the room before returning to Harper. "I'm not a doctor or a therapist," she said, her voice soft yet resolute, as if testing her own conviction. Harper smiled. Rarely had she seen him smile, like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You have done more with coffee and kindness than any $1 million program we've ever had. Brew Haven isn't just a cafe. It's where you built a community, where soldiers rediscovered themselves." His words fell like a stone on a still pond, sending ripples through Sarah's heart, reminding her of Freedom Hour gatherings, shared stories, and the grateful eyes of her patrons. Suddenly, a small voice spoke from the corner. "Is that you?" Emma Ruiz, a young veteran, stepped forward, her eyes shy but shining with hope. The faint scar on her arm told a silent story, and beside her stood Hope, her Labrador service dog in a bright red vest. "I watched your video," Emma said, her voice trembling as though each word were a step on a tightrope. "You stood up for that soldier and his dog. I haven't dared to visit the cafe, but I thought, maybe I could come to the place you lead." Sarah blinked, her chest swelling with an unnamed emotion. She looked at Emma, then at Hope, and finally at Harper, who stood quietly as though he had known this moment would arrive. She drew in a deep breath, feeling the weight of what lay before her. "I will do it," she said, her voice low but certain, like a silent vow. Harper nodded, respect shining in his eyes. From that moment on, Sarah embarked on a new journey, not just as a cafe manager, but as the leader of a healing movement, where kindness and understanding would become the most powerful remedies. That unfinished room, with its stacked chairs and blank whiteboard, now carried a promise. It would become a home for souls who needed to be seen. The Veterans Support Center at Fort Lee, Virginia, quickly became a beacon of hope, shining brightly amid the dull days of the military base. Just weeks after Sarah Mitchell agreed to lead, the once unfinished room, with its haphazard stacks of folding chairs and blank whiteboard, was transformed into a sanctuary where veterans from across Virginia gathered. They didn't come solely for counseling or therapy. They came to reclaim a sense of belonging, to feel that they still had a place in this world. Sarah did not build the center with flashy plans or $1 million budgets. She did it with the same simple touches that made Brew Haven Hanover's heart. A whiteboard hung near the door, handwritten with the prompt, "Need to talk, need coffee," cozy corners where service dogs could curl up freely, and an old leather notebook in which she carefully recorded each person's name, birthday, and preferences as if preserving precious fragments of life. Emma Ruiz, the young veteran with the faint scar on her arm, began bringing pencils and paper, sketching scenes from her days in Afghanistan, her trembling lines gradually becoming her way of telling her story. James Carter and his dog Rusty became regulars, arriving every Tuesday not just for coffee but to sit in that respectful silence, where James could smile without explanation. Mia, the young barista from Brew Haven, showed up weekly with fresh, dark roast and a bright smile, along with ideas to make the center even warmer, from hanging Emma's drawings on the walls to organizing evening storytelling sessions. Sarah stood among them not as a lofty leader, but as a friend, a listener, to pour coffee with love and notice the small details, like how a veteran would gently clutch his dog's leash when recalling difficult days. Word of the center spread like a breeze through Virginia's fields. The local paper, the Hanover Chronicle, ran a front-page feature titled, "From Café to Base, Sarah Mitchell Rebuilds Veteran Spirit." The article traced Sarah's journey, from the moment she stood up for James and Rusty to how she turned an empty room at Fort Lee into a place of healing. The story resonated with Hanover's residents and soon rippled outward via social media posts and conversations in diners across the region. But the surprise that stunned Sarah came on a quiet afternoon when a thick envelope bearing the gold seal of the Department of Defense arrived at the center. Inside was an official letter nominating her for the National Civilian Service Award for Veteran Support, along with an invitation to speak at the National Veterans Conference in Washington, D.C. Sarah read the letter over and over, her hand trembling, not from pride, but because she had never imagined that her simple acts of kindness could echo so far. At the conference, Sarah stood before a grand ballroom, its crystal chandeliers shimmering, cameras perched at every angle, and hundreds of eyes fixed on her. The simple green dress she wore could not compete with the gleaming uniforms and elegant suits in the room, yet her presence, sincere and unwavering, commanded the space. Her voice was soft, but each word felt carved from truth. "I am neither a general nor a doctor," she began, her gaze sweeping the audience before settling on faces marked by war. "I only serve coffee and listen. But I have learned that veterans do not need fixing. They need to be seen. One day, I was fired for letting a soldier sit with his dog. But that was the day I understood that kindness, however small, can change everything." Silence fell over the room, then erupted into applause, many rising to their feet, some wiping away tears. In the back row, James Carter nodded, Rusty lying quietly at his feet, as if the two of them were witnessing a victory in hushed tribute. Sarah did more than speak. She inspired, like the flame she ignited at Brew Haven, now burning brightly on a grander stage. As she stepped down, her eyes met Emma's, standing quietly in the corner, clutching a newly drawn portrait. A service dog beside its soldier, etched with the words, "Honor begins with kindness." In that moment, Sarah knew that the center, her story, and the lives she had touched were crafting a legacy far beyond her wildest dreams. Back in Hanover, Virginia, Sarah Mitchell continued to lead the Veterans Support Center at Fort Lee, which had become not just a pilot project, but the flagship program for veteran services nationwide. The once barren room, cluttered with folding chairs, now pulsed with life, filled with laughter, shared stories, and those sacred moments of silence where souls found peace. Through her genuine simplicity, Sarah transformed the center into a true home, not with flashy strategies but with kindness, the most powerful weapon she possessed. Meanwhile, Brew Haven, the small cafe in town, underwent its own transformation. The wall behind the register now displayed photos of James Carter, Emma Ruiz, and other veterans, each image telling a story of courage and healing. In one corner, a space dubbed Sarah's Corner was furnished with cozy chairs and tables so that no one ever had to sit alone, a silent promise that everyone was welcome. One quiet evening, Sarah stood alone in the center under the soft glow of overhead lights, illuminating walls now marked by dozens of lives. In her hand, she held 3 photographs. The first was of her husband, First Lieutenant Daniel Mitchell, grinning outside Brew Haven in a blue sweater, coffee cup in hand, the snapshot taken 2 weeks before his final deployment. The second was from the National Veterans Conference, where she stood on stage, her gaze steadfast amid thunderous applause. The third was an older image of her and Daniel standing shoulder to shoulder in front of the cafe, their smiles as warm as a summer sunrise. Sarah hung them on the wall next to Emma's artwork and the photo of James with Rusty. Beneath them, in black marker, she wrote, "Kindness sows honor." Simple words, yet like a vow, they reverberated with the power of small acts. Sarah's story did not end in Hanover. It rippled outward like waves on a lake, reaching veterans who had lost hope and now found light at the center. Emma, whose drawings grew bolder by the day, continued to tell her story through each pencil stroke, from the darkest days on the battlefield to the brightness she discovered at Fort Lee. James, once cloaked in silence, now recounted the moment Sarah stood up for him and Rusty, his voice trembling with pride. Each person who crossed the center's threshold brought a new piece of the tapestry, and Sarah, with her weathered notebook, recorded every name and detail just as she had at Brewhaven. One afternoon, a young veteran with anxious eyes stepped inside and quietly asked, "Is this a place for people like me?" Sarah smiled, her gaze as warm as Virginia sunshine. "No, son," she replied. "This is a place for all of us." Her answer, simple yet profound, stood as an open door, inviting every heart to enter. This story is not just about a cafe or one woman. It is a reminder that kindness, however small, can send ripples that change the world. Sarah Mitchell wears no uniform and holds no rank, yet she upheld the dignity of soldiers by standing up, listening, and loving. We Americans, from small towns like Hanover to the great cities, know the power of kindness. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a single act of compassion that transformed a life? A moment when someone stood up for what was right, as Sarah did? Share your story in the comments. Your experience could inspire thousands more. If Sarah's journey touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share this video to honor silent heroes across America. Because sometimes, the most powerful actions start with a cup of coffee, a heart that won't yield, and a community willing to stand together. Let us spread this message from Virginia to every home in the United States. Hit the share button now and tell us, who is the Sarah Mitchell in your life? Their story deserves to be told, and we want to hear it. Together we can light sparks of hope, one story at a time.